All right. You guys ready to jump into week 3 of our This Is Us series? Some of you have talked to me after the last couple messages and said, you can go into the next thing. I've had a few who say, were you thinking about me? No, listen, this has been planned for a while, all right? If you don't blame anyone, blame the Holy Spirit, don't blame me. I wasn't thinking of any of you or any specific situation. If you haven't been with us the last couple weeks, you're wondering why. Well, 2 weeks ago we talked about marriage. And the last week we talked about singleness. And I realized that I'd never preached an entire message on being single. What does that look like? And so I did that last week, and it was interesting. And what I found as I did the research, and I talked about last week, is 50.2, not 52, but 50.2% of adult Americans are single. And so we're about split half and half. And here's the thing I want you to take away from both of those messages. Is that whether you're married or you're single, you have responsibility. And ultimately, wherever you find yourself, right? Love God in that situation. Be devoted to that phase in life, whether it's temporary or not. All right? And so, if you weren't here the last couple weeks, I encourage you to check out those messages. I shared some practical things in there. And this series is really centered around the idea of the Christ-centered family. And how, depending upon whether you're married or single, you have kids or not, it's going to shape the priorities. Right? If you're single, all of our priorities, whether it's single or married or whatever, our first priority should be our relationship with God. And they're framed this way: they're relational first, and then they're what we do second. And then depending upon if you're married, obviously if you're married, your next priority is your spouse. If you're single, then it might be a child. And we kind of go through this list of priorities based upon our age, stage, and where we find ourselves in life. Next week, we're going to talk about the Christ-centered family, lastly, as the body of Christ. What does it mean, our priority to the body of Christ? And so, this week, though, we're going to talk about parenting. And so whether you were a parent, are a parent, might be a parent, or never going to be a parent, I believe there will be some things today that God will speak to you. By the way, this is not this is more of a 30,000-foot view. There's some really practical things, and before I forget to mention it, I'm going to mention it now. I talked to Pastor Nikki on the Blast Kids page. She will post later today a list of books and things for parents that are incredibly practical. All right? If you say, well, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on that Blast Kids page, you can send her an email through the church website, and she'll send you that list. All right? So some really practical stuff there this morning. Parenting, it's a challenge. If you've been a parent or even thought about parenting, you understand what I'm talking about. I remember before I was a parent, walking through Walmart with a great amount of judgment. Saying things like, when I'm a parent, I will never or I will, and you fill in the blank. And you're laughing because there are those of you in this room that have done the same thing. Here's the thing. Before I was a parent, I had lots and lots and lots of theories and little to no experience. Okay, no experience. Now I have 4 children, 14 to 2. I have lots and lots of experience and no theories. Because as soon as you think you have a theory, God will say, okay, here, take this child. Have fun.
Good luck.
I have 4 different kids raised in the same home, same environment, same parents, for the most part. I say that only because we've changed in the course of the 10 years between the oldest and the youngest. And I have 4 incredibly different children. Incredibly unique, that have to be parented differently. Not one of them is more challenging than the other. They're just different. And so I found that many of my theories that I first thought were tested quite thoroughly. So I want to talk to you from this perspective today. What does it mean as parents to lead? Ultimately, you're the leaders of your home. I didn't put it in your notes, but I believe one of the greatest challenges of parenting today is how do you, as a parent, be a good leader? You see, I think one of the challenges I see in the church today is far too many parents giving up their leadership role. In case you don't know this, you're the primary biblical teacher of your kids. And if you're not, you've given up a leadership role. You're the primary teacher of your kids. Now, we have great education systems and wonderful teachers, but the question is this: are we looking into and are we seeing what they're being taught? Because although you may not be the one teaching them, you're still responsible for it. It's your leadership role. I said it in the marriage thing. Ultimately, children are a temporary assignment. It doesn't mean that you won't always be parent. Yes, you will always be parent. But them in your home, you get about an 18-year window to train them. And then you send them out to see if you were a failure. No. You train them. Ultimately, you are raising children that have free will and free choice. Don't make decisions, don't make mistakes. And although, listen, I get it, your parenting changes once they leave the house, right? It's not that you're no longer the parent, but that role changes in their life. And as they take on new responsibilities and new relationship roles, it morphs and it changes. Here's a picture I want to give you today. Everyone in the room knows what a thermostat is, right? Okay, this is yes? Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure we're on the same thing. And we all know what a thermometer is. Okay? My question is this, as a parent, and I just want you to get this picture in your mind. As a parent, have you chosen to be a thermostat or a thermometer? I will promise you this, the thermostat's a whole lot harder. Because all a thermometer does is it just takes the temperature. It reads the temperature. This is what everybody else is doing. This is what the culture says I should do. It just takes the temperature. A thermostat says, no, regardless of whether it's cold or hot, I'm going to decide where this is set at. And here's the rub for us as parents. It's much more difficult to lead. That's why I titled the message today, Parenting. It's a challenge. I want to agree on a couple of things this morning. First of all, parenting is leadership in the home. And I believe that the home is the most challenging leadership assignment of our lives. Can I tell you that for me as a pastor and the things that I have to do and working with boards and things for the last 20 years, by far parenting is a much more difficult leadership challenge. There's only 4 of them. Leading a church is far easier than leading a home. And why is that? Because there's so many things that go into it. Well, first of all, we understand the enemy understands that if he can divide the home, he can win the spiritual battle. If he can divide mom and dad, he gets a foothold with our kids. We talked about a lot of these things in the last couple of messages, whether on marriage, divorce, and singleness, and those type of things. But here's the reality. And I want to kind of just lay this out here at the very beginning. There are no perfect parents here. There are no perfect parents. In fact, I would dare say that there's probably some of you in this room that are a better parent than I am. There's no perfect parents. Secondly, here's the other thing. All the parents, can I just encourage you with something? I put myself at the top of this list. We can all do better. It's really quiet in here right now. This is supposed to be encouraging, okay? All right? No perfect parents. We can all do better. Just like marriage, let me say this, just like marriage, parenting is far more, I want you to hear me this morning, parenting is far more about us than it is about them. See, marriage, we fall in the trap that we're just like, God, if you would just change them. Right? Now listen, I understand that there are situations and there's stuff and our spouses, that's not what I'm talking about. The reality is if you want to make marriage work, you work on yourself, right? That person refuses whatever things happen, that is what it is, but if you've done everything you can do. In parenting, the person we have to work on the most is ourselves. Listen, they're kids. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do dumb stuff. They're kids. And in every situation, we must remind ourselves, whether we like it or not, we are the adult. Thank you, someone got it. Perfect. Right? They're kids, we're adults. Our parenting is, I would say, the vast majority of the time, more about us than it is about them. I'm reminded often that parenting is about far more than just obedience. It's about changing the heart of a squirrely, free will agent human being. You see, if all I win is obedience, then most likely at the end of the day I've lost the war. If all I get is conformity to a list of rules, have I changed the heart behind that? Have I reinforced the why? Or have I only conformed the how? It's what makes parenting such a challenge. My goal at the end of the day is to not raise well-behaved children who do what they're told simply because they're told. Our goal, and some of you are like, hold on a second here, Pastor. Listen, our goal of parenting is to help form a Christ-like heart in our child, that they might know Him and that they might serve Him. And I can promise you this, it's a whole lot harder to win the heart than it is to win the attitude. But once you have the heart, the attitude follows. At least that's my theory, anyways. As I said earlier. It's a challenge. Proverbs chapter 24. Proverbs chapter 24. By the way, you can respond this morning. I mean, some of you are just like, oh, just go ahead and get done with this because we've got to move on, right? Proverbs chapter 24. I'm going to give you a couple things today. First thing is this, Proverbs 24. I love Proverbs. My new reading plan for 2020, I get some Proverbs or Psalms every day. By the way, if you've never done this before, I'd encourage you at some point as you're doing your reading plans, do a proverb a day. It's incredible what that'll do over the course of a month. Proverbs chapter 24, verses 3 through 4 says this: by wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. The writer of Proverbs tells us that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. It's not a fear that says I'm afraid of, it's a fear that understands who He is and His place in the universe. And here he says, by wisdom, in other words, there's a fear of the Lord that brings wisdom. That wisdom is the wisdom we need to build a house. It says that wisdom is where a house is built. It's interesting that the Hebrew here is a picture of restoration. We often think of built as building maybe something new, but this comes to us as the idea of restoration, or to establish, meaning to set in order. I believe the writer of Proverbs here is talking about how we continually work on the home. How do we restore and to set in order the things that are happening? And ultimately he says it's by wisdom. And by the way, wisdom is different than knowledge. Wisdom is something that comes from the Lord Himself as we seek Him and we get to know Him. And ultimately, the writer of Proverbs says that we feel that through knowledge, the knowledge that comes through wisdom, the rooms of the house are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. Ultimately, by the way, this is a picture of experiencing fulfillment in who God is. It is by no means a picture of material things. It is a life that has fulfillment. So today I want to talk to you about 3 challenges to parenting. How many of you guys understand that that is not an exhaustive list? Right? I want to talk about 3 quick challenges, and then I want to talk to you about 3 things that every kid needs, and I'll work through these quickly this morning. First, I'll talk to you about 3 challenges to parenting. I said earlier there's more, but these are just 3 that I want to cherry pick this morning because I think they're things that we often focus on. The first one I will go through very quickly. The first challenge to parenting is we're too busy. It's a constant refrain we hear. We live in a world of productivity and busyness. And I think we would all agree. I don't think I have to unpack that a long time this morning. Our pace of life. Most of us in this room live with FOMO. You know what that means? It's the fear of missing out. And if you don't believe me, when's the last time you were supposed to sign up for something that you did it early? Right? Most of us wait because, you never know, something else might come up. And I don't want to miss out on that, so I wait till the last minute. Listen, my wife and I just did it Friday. By the way, teenagers, fine arts thing, that's done, right? They're supposed to get, if you missed it, talk to Pastor Kim, but I think it's, all right? They were due Friday. Guess when my wife and I signed up? Friday night. Right? It wasn't a fair minute. We just, I was busy. But we often live in that challenge. We have a lack of rest and we feel guilty when we slow down. We have a lack of peace and there's no joy. We feel drained emotionally. And when we walk through those things, it's a sign to us. When our emotions get drained, by the way, emotions are a great servant but a terrible master. But they're an insight. They're like warning lights on the dash. I talked about that in week 1. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 through 16 says this, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as what? Wise." Going back to the writer of Proverbs, talking about a house is built by wisdom. Verse 16, making the most of what? Every opportunity, because the days are evil. It's an incredible reminder this morning by the writer of Ephesians that we have moments. I had my oldest son last night, and I'm like, you got taller again. I don't have to reach down anymore. We have moments. Moments. And those moments fly by. Making the most of those moments. Why? Because the days are evil, which leads me to the second reason that there's challenge to parenting. Second reason is this, is that culture ages kids. Our kids are growing up at an accelerated rate. At least the things they challenge are. I'm not so sure that that's true cognitively, although we force them at a younger and younger age to learn more and more and more. And that isn't a statement of for or against, that's just a statement of fact. I look at some of the stuff like my kids learn now, and I'm like, I was not learning that at that age. And some of you can say you were or you weren't. My 8th grader is like algebra and trigonometry. I learned that not in 8th grade. It's amazing. The accelerated rate. In fact, there's actually a study on this, and it's actually called Kids Getting Older, Younger. The acceleration of this, they're experiencing and exposed to things at an accelerated rate. One person said this, that, and this is where, again, by the way, if you haven't noticed this, like especially in these series, we talk about real stuff, right? Do you know that the average child is exposed to more sexually explicit material on their way to school than their grandparents were in an entire day? I'm just going to let that just rest for just a minute. Books, stuff they view, we have literally incredibly powerful computers in the palm of our hands. And I'm not here today to make you feel guilty or to make you feel bad or to tell you what to do or say this is the age, but I am here to say it's ultimately as parents our responsibility. There are things we can't control outside the homes, and there are things inside the home we can control. There's a controversy a few years ago that arose amongst marketers about how they've changed toward girls. So just a few years back, critics described clothing designed for young girls ages 8 to 11, let me say that again, ages 8 to 11, as sexual. And it almost seems like it should be ridiculous that this is even a thing, but I actually went and checked a couple years ago, and department stores selling youngsters thongs and t-shirts that say naughty girl for ages 8 to 11. Really? Got really quiet in here again, didn't it? Regardless of where we feel like as a world, the question is, why? Along with the fact that it's been a question throughout years that Barbie has always had the subtle sexuality, maybe for many of us not so subtle. The reality is that she was originally targeted, by the way, for girls ages 9 to 12. That was her original target audience. Now Barbie is targeted primarily to 3 to 7-year-olds. That's now her target audience. You say, Pastor, why are you sharing this? I'm just throwing out some things to you to help you understand the fact that kids are aging quicker. The things that they face, the things that they're exposed to. In fact, there was a competitor to Barbie. There's a whole lawsuit, which wasn't really a thing that I remember all that much, but do you guys remember Bratz dolls? Literally, the quote for Bratz dolls is they are the in-your-face attitude. Many parents complained that they were too sexual in nature. I'm not making a statement today to say this is where you should or shouldn't come down. My statement is simply this, and I can go on and on and on and on. I don't think I need to belabor the point this morning. The point is that our kids are growing up faster and faster. The things they're being exposed to are increasingly more and more evil. Things outside of our control. And the question is, as parents, what do we do? Here's what I know, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. In a world of incredible technology, there's also things that we can do. I'm just going to hit pause here real quick. Can I just say something to parents? Like, one of the greatest things you can do is find some good monitoring software. All right? Most kids think that they can delete text messages and they can delete their history on their browsers. But listen, if you'll take just a little time to be a little tech savvy, you can see all of that stuff, whether they delete it or not. All right? There's a device called a Circle you can install in your home that literally allows you to track their cell phone. Some of the kids in the room are hating me right now. It allows you to track their cell phone. You can see their usage time. You can run the internet in your home. You can set timers for them. You can see their text messages. You can see their browsing history. It is a beautiful thing. And here's the funny thing to me. Like sometimes kids will say, but I have the right. You have no rights. You live in your parents' home.
Amen.
You're paying the bills. You have no rights. That was my message to the kids in the room real quick, all right? Honor your parents. By the way, let me just kind of talk to kids for a second. Honor your mother and father. It's one of the great calls of Scripture. Something we're called to do. And there's a blessing attached to that. I've told you this before, the very first verse we teach our kids, and I'm okay with the manipulation, all right? It's this: children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. My son's back there going, yes, that was the first verse I had to learn. And we reminded of them often. 1 Corinthians 13 says this, verse 11, when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. The problem is that and there's articles written, and again, I'm not going to reference them all. You can message me. Sometimes you can do the research yourself. We're stuck in what's called prolonged adolescence. Prolonged adolescence simply means this: it starts earlier and it lasts longer. In fact, most experts tell us that most people do not emerge from adolescence until they're nearly 40. You're laughing because you've met those people. We have guys in their early 30s still in their parents' basements playing video games. And can I just say something? I'm going to reel you back in here for a second. We laugh about it for a minute, but can I tell you something? There's nothing funny about that. I'm going to get myself in trouble if I don't move on here, so I'm just going to stop there. Listen, I have met a lot of 40 and 50-year-olds that were completely nothing but just really old-looking teenagers. And here's the thing, I'm not even necessarily blaming them. Like, at some point, if you're... All right, okay, I'm getting something wrong. All right. I said earlier, right, parents, we're the thermostats, not the thermometers, right? We're the leaders. We get what we expect. We get what we expect. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. What does that mean? 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 8 say this: for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness, knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's interesting the way it's written here in 2 Peter. That there is like this process that includes things like self-control and perseverance that ultimately allows us to be people that truly know how to love. A love that understands that just giving people what they want isn't necessarily love. The challenge to raise our kids with integrity and character. The last challenge this morning, and I'll go through this one quickly, is image over substance. We easily fall into the comparison trap. We view people's social media. We see parents on social media going on vacations and making purchases and who they spend time with. And we measure our lives fulfilled based on a snapshot of our friends' lives. How many of you guys realize, when's the last time you saw one of your friends post like a picture of their dirty bathroom and piles of laundry? Like, we don't do that, right? Like, we finally get one room cleaned and we take a picture of the clean room and post it, right? How about we worry less about comparison and more about what God is calling us to do? I love the fact that we have a number of people in the Dave Ramsey class, because it helps me to understand that one of the greatest things you have to break away from is comparing what you drive and where you go and how you spend your time. Comparison's a killer. Because at the end of the day, you don't know the compromises and choices that person has made to do the things they're doing. But I do know the statistics that so many Americans have not just thousands, but tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt. They're literally one little crisis away from bankruptcy. And yet we look at their lives and we think, I wish I had that. Well, if you only knew what was underneath. We feel like we have to have the best clothes, homes, vacations. Run our families crazy to amass a ton of debt to make it happen. Your kids, listen, I want you to hear me this morning. Your kids don't need your stuff. They need more of you. They need to learn how to be content. In fact, one of the great lessons is even when you can do it, sometimes you shouldn't just because they don't need it. I got 3 head nods. Everybody else is like, I'm not sure if I should agree or not. It's okay. It's okay. If you haven't for a while, find someone that's older than you. Find someone that's in their 70s or 80s and ask them about what life was like. Ask them about the sacrifices they made or their parents made. You say, why? Because it's a good reminder that as much as people want to tell us around us how difficult life is, man, we have it really good. We have it really good. Philippians 4:12 says this, I know what it is to be in need. This is the Apostle Paul talking, and I know what it is to have plenty. And he says this, I have learned, what's that word? Learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. It's one of the great challenges of life. Have I learned? Part of the fallen nature is to be discontent. That's part of our nature. Part of our sinful nature is being discontent with the things around us. We as people need to learn what it means to be content. So how do I deal with these challenges? By the way, that was just a short list. There's more. I figured we'd be here all day if I continue with the whole list, all right? I'm not even sure I can come up with a complete list. So what do? They give you the positive side of this. What are 3 things that kids need? And these are 3 things, by the way, that as parents, I believe you can start implementing today. Okay? What are 3 things that kids need? First thing is this. Every kid needs security. Security. See, Pastor, what do you mean? Every child is wired with the need to feel secure. And security is not based upon things. Security comes through love. That we love them. And you say, well, Pastor, I do love them. Listen, Things will never show your kid you love them. Stuff will never show them you love them. You know what will show them you love them? You know what will show them that they're secure? When you make a decision that puts them at a higher priority than something else, whether it's work or friends or activities. Not God, but God first. Not your marriage, but pretty much anything else. When you make a choice from one time to another to put them at a place of priority over those things. Love makes a child feel secure. Our love prepares and creates them, our love prepares and creates an environment for them to experience God's love. One of the greatest crises we have in this world is that often we don't understand the love of God because we've never understood what it means to be loved. That we love our kids unconditionally and that love will never be taken away from them. Now, love doesn't mean at points won't be disappointed or we won't discipline. In fact, Scripture often teaches that some of the greatest love is discipline. I've had to do this a few different times, and I think I'm going to have to pay him $1 for using him, but I was in a particular rough day with my son. I'm not going to tell you which one it was. I have 2 of them, so. I looked him in the eye, and I've had to say this a few different times. I'm glad you're my son. And I'm thankful that God allowed me to be your dad. I said it more for me than even for him. Why? Reminding me that, listen, I'm the adult. I'm the adult. It's also a reminder of that relationship, that we have that conversation. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 says this. We often think about this in terms of love. By the way, the context of this is actually spiritual gifts. We read it at weddings in 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8 says this: love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, is not proud, it does not dishonor others, is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always perseveres, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. The context, by the way, is spiritual gifts. What does it mean to truly love someone? There's a great book Gary Chapman wrote a number of years ago called The 5 Love Languages. If you've never read it, I encourage all premarital couples to do it. They also wrote a companion with the 5 Love Languages of Children. But it basically goes something like this. All of us give and receive love through one of these 5 love languages. They are words of affirmation, speaking to them encouragingly, pointing out good things, quality time, acts of service, gifts. That's literally giving and receiving gifts. And physical touch. When you say, what does that mean? That means meaningful touch. His premise is this, is that when you love someone, you need to find out how they best receive love. And when you do so, you can fill what he calls the love tank. Now, all people can feel loved from all 5 of these, but they will feel most loved by their native love language. And you can read the book, I'm not going to get into all that, but here's the point. Do you know your kids well enough to know what they need? As I promise you this, if you have more than one child, you probably have more than one love language in your home. And you will most likely have a love language, well, you do have a love language yourself, but most likely you will find it easy to speak the language you need the most when quite possibly what they need isn't your native language. So when you say, what do you mean, Pastor? I'm saying it's work. It's a challenge. Gary Smalley says this: there are 4 key ingredients for a loving relationship: unconditional security, meaningful communication, shared experiences, and healing touch. It's one of the great challenges for us. If we want to provide security, we want to raise children in that environment, we have to find out what it means for them to be loved. The second thing that every child needs is significance. Significance. We all have a desire to make a difference, and that comes from knowing that what we are doing is making an impact on the world. Significance comes by helping your children understand their purpose. John 10:10 is a reminder that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But the end of that is this: I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. There is significance in helping a kid understand their significance. They're significant to the Lord. that God wants to use them. God has a plan for them. These are things we should repeat over and over and over to them. We should remind them that a significant life is a life lived for Christ. It's a life where they lead at least one person to Christ. That's significance. But what inside of that is God wanting to do? Do we fill their lives with adventure, with shared experiences? It means that there is acceptance, attention, affirmation. And can I say this, because Gary Chapman said it too, or so did Gary Smalley. Listen, our lives also need adventure. You want your kids to experience significance. Adventure is part of that. Making our faith exciting. Listen, you give your kids a boring faith, a faith where you have to pull teeth, a faith where whatever, then there's no wonders that they'll often walk away from the Lord. Can I encourage you? And Pastor Kim's back here, and here's one challenge that I have for all of you. Get your kids involved with missions before they graduate high school. Send them at least once on a mission. It will make an incredible impact on their lives. There's lots of opportunities. Go and listen, go with them, serve alongside them. Make it an adventure. Build experiences. Why? Because there's something that's learned in the midst of that. The heart will gravitate to things that offer adventure and significance. And by the way, if we don't give it, they will seek out risk, pleasure, and adventure on their own. So either we make the home the place for that, or they will find it themselves. The last thing that every kid needs is strength. Strength is found in hope, and hope is ultimately found in the Lord. Proverbs 13:12 says this, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. When your kids have hope, then no matter what happens, they know who the source is. It shapes how they view God. Philippians 4 reminds us, we said it earlier, right? I know what it is to have need and to have plenty, but I have learned. I've learned what it means to have strength. He goes on to say in verse 13, I can do all things through Him who gives me strength. Strength what? That no matter what my circumstance is. By the way, we often interpret that verse incredibly wrong. We just want to apply it to anything and everything. It's not that. There's a context to this. In being content or in being well-fed or hungry, in that context, that basically saying, regardless of my circumstances, I can serve who He is. Paul is saying, I am ready for anything because the strength that comes through the hope in Jesus Christ. If kids don't find security, significance, and strength in Christ, then they will find it in relationships or things or money or approval, and often ultimately substance abuse. Because they're always searching. We love to quote the verse that talks about a home in Proverbs. Train a child in the way they should go. When they grow old, they won't depart from it. And some of you live in guilt, especially with older kids. You're like, well, Pastor, I did that, but I don't see the fruit of it. We ask the question, where did I go wrong? It's very interesting. That verse in Hebrew is quite interesting to read. Again, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, so don't, okay. As I've read people who've studied it and know the Hebrew. It's not saying it's a foolproof plan that your kids don't have free will, because that's not how it works. But a better translation would be literally that if you develop a taste for it, they'll always know where to find it. The word picture is actually of a newborn child and a mother feeding it for the first time and having to help that child get a taste of that new milk and understanding where their nutrients comes from. That's literally the word picture that's used in the Hebrew there. That if you'll develop a taste for it. In Jesus' time, when they were teaching in the rabbinical schools when kids were young, the very first lesson they would teach them, they would take a slate, they'd pass it out to the kids. And then the rabbi that was teaching those young children, he would put a little honey on the slate and he would tell them to lick the slate before they'd ever written on it. He said, listen, he said, I want you to know. He wanted to remind them, he wanted to develop a taste, that that's what God's word is to your soul. It was a picture that he wanted to drive into them. Our job as parents is to develop a taste for who he is. So listen, you're the leader. Can I be a little, listen, I hope you know that I love you today. If you're new, I love you too. I'm glad you're here. But listen, as parents, we got to lead. No, kids don't get to decide when their bedtime is and who they go with all the time. And no, they don't get to decide when they get certain pieces of technology, when they don't get it. And no, they don't get to decide if they come to church. And that just got me in trouble with probably a couple emails, but that's okay. Listen, if you let your kids lead, you will reap what you sow. Can I tell you? It's really weird because my mom's here today. And my dad's here today too. Listen, I didn't even ask whether I was going to church or not. You know why? Because it would have been pointless to ask. I was going. I went to a little tiny church. I'm talking like on a good Sunday, 8 to 10 people. We had a thriving youth group of 2, me and my sister. And I would usually, especially as I got to be an older teenager, I would throw on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, which often kind of rubbed my mom wrong because she wanted me to dress nicer, but I think she was just happy I was there. I'd often sit sometimes, because listen, we had no piano, like we had a sweet old lady who played piano, but then she kind of couldn't anymore, so like we sang a few cobbled hymns a cappella, which was really bad. And I sat there with my arms folded a lot of Sundays with probably a bad attitude. But there were things going on that I didn't understand. Things that I was challenged with. Can I tell you a single one of those sermons that were preached? No, I can't tell you any of them. But there's something about the environment that impacted who I was and who I was becoming. And I've often wondered, had I not been made to endure the punishment that was church? Parents, can I tell you something? The greatest thing you can do is position them in a place where they can experience God. Ultimately, they're free. They got free will. They have to choose, and we want to give them as many opportunities as they can. But we're the leaders. Final thing I want to say is this. This is where it falls back on us as parents to lead. We all understand how vaccination works, right? Vaccination works by giving us a little bit so we build antibodies to fight it off when the real thing comes. Parents, can I challenge you with something? A little bit of Jesus in your life is like giving your child a vaccine against him. If this is just something you do, if this is just like, oh, we're going to show up and, this is our God time, hour and a half on a Sunday morning, but it doesn't have anything to do with our life the rest of the week, can I tell you that what you're doing is ultimately vaccinating your kids against him? Because all they see is hypocrisy and listen, I want you to hear me today. If you're doing your best, I'm not coming down on you. This isn't meant to be that. I just want to help you understand that the greatest thing you can do for your kids is to dig into that relationship with him. To know him, for it to be real in your life. That you pray together, that you put that out. That you're honest when you make mistakes. The greatest gift you can give your life is to live a life fully devoted to Christ. So my question today, will we be, as parents, thermostats, thermometers? Would you stand with me this morning? I told you earlier, Pastor Nikki's going to post a list of great resources out there. And I want to encourage you, the last thing is this, listen, I believe with all my heart, the parents in this room, that you're doing your best. God sees the effort that you're giving. I just want to encourage you once again, listen, dig in. Dig in. You got an assignment to do. You can do this. Be you. Be honest. Wrestle with stuff. Admit the challenges. You can remind your kids, hey, remember Pastor Ray said he wasn't perfect either, so, it's not about being perfect. Or continuing to grow what it means to be a parent. I'm going to ask our altar team if they would come this morning. These altars will be open. If you don't know Christ, you don't have a relationship with him today, there'll be someone here that can pray with you. If you're new, and the reception will be out in just a moment, you can meet Natalie out in the foyer, or myself. Father, today I love you. God, I thank you for your word. God, I pray over our parents today in this room. God, I pray you give them strength. God, I thank you that they're willing to fight in the midst of this incredible challenge. God, I thank you as they face the challenges, Lord, that you would walk alongside them and you give them strength. God, I pray over our families as they fight to find and give a place of security for their kids. A place where their kids feel loved and accepted. A place where they can find strength and significance, God. Holy Spirit, give them wisdom today, I pray. God, we may apply your word. And God, help us to live it out in everything we say and do. Father, I love you so much. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen. 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 Amen.